Welcome to the Frontline Herbalism podcast with your host Nicole Rose from the Solidarity Apothecary. This is your place for all things plants and liberation. Let's get started.
Hello, welcome back to the Frontline Herbalism podcast. I hope you are well. I'm sorry I didn't do the Planning Your Herbal Year podcast. I'm going to record it on Monday, but the 2026 Herbal Path Planner is still free to download and available. So don't wait for that episode. But this week's just gotten away with me, and my little one didn't go to nursery on Monday because he's still recovering from this virus that literally the whole world has had. I got it mid-December, and I'm still got a bit of a sore throat and just an actual snot bag. So I don't know if I would have been able to handle recording a whole giant episode. But yeah, thank you for your patience. But it was nice timing to get a text from Elia saying that an interview we did was being published. So I'm going to introduce him now. But basically, Elia runs a podcast called the Fire These Times podcast. As well as some other things. I'm going to read his blurb out in a second, but he basically messaged me and reached out and asked if I'd be up for an interview about burnout because he'd been listening to my free Overcoming Burnout podcast. And I was like, yeah, of course. But I was a little bit politically intimidated because all the other episodes are really full on interviews with all this kind of political geographic history and analysis on current affairs, and I'm just oh, I like plants. But yeah, it was such a fucking good interview. It was just before Taylor's inquest, so it felt very kind of interesting to be asked questions about that kind of body of work that I was really creating in those times when Taylor was alive, where I was really testing my limits around burnout and supporting people in distress. I'm still doing that regularly now, but really that kind of intense prisoner solidarity stuff was really the focus of my day-to-day, minute-to-minute life. So yeah, it was just interesting to be interviewed, and yeah, we had some good chats about the politics of grief and burnout and herbalism, and he threw in some massive questions how does herbalism relate to capitalism, and how does the body relate to capitalism? And I'm just ugh. But yeah, I think I did okay. But yeah, please have a listen. Please check out the Fire in These Times podcast as well, and also check out their crew have a whole, I'll put the link in the show notes, but there's a few different podcasts, including a mutual aid podcast, which is really worth checking out. So yeah, so I'm having this conversation with Elia, and I'm going to read his blurb out. So he says, I'm a UK-based Lebanese-Palestinian writer, researcher and podcaster whose work focuses on hauntings, anti-authoritarianism, international solidarity and alternative futurities. I run the Fire These Times podcast and the Hauntologies newsletter. I nearly read his "do with that what you want" comment, but anyway, please check out his show, or shows plural, and yeah, please check out the Overcoming Burnout private podcast that we talk about a lot. Oh my god, and I forgot to say, I'm going to do a separate episode about this, but I have opened enrollment, or I've opened the application process for the Rooted in Struggle program. So this is a 3-month offering supporting 9-ish. I might be a bit flexible because I've had loads of interest. But it's basically an offering for people struggling with burnout who are involved in different struggles for liberation. You get one-to-one calls with me, specifically about your health, where I do your sort of comprehensive herbal recommendations, get things in the post to you, and then every 2 weeks we have a group call where we're talking about things collectively, and then there's also various pre-recorded videos and suggested readings and things that I've put together. So yeah, I've decided to open it up internationally. Hawthorn was only for people in the UK, but I kind of wanted to, I just had so many requests for Hawthorn for people not from England. So I just felt or England, Wales, Scotland. So, I just thought I would make it more international. So I'll put a link in the show notes. The deadline to apply is next Sunday. I can't remember the date off the top of my head, but yeah, I will, like I said, I'll do a separate episode about that. So, please check that out if you're interested, if you're struggling with burnout and you want some collective support and some herbal support, I think it's going to be really special. And yeah, thanks for listening. I will talk to you next week. Okay, bye.
Hey everyone, Elia here. This is one of those episodes that I don't necessarily know how to summarize, at least not do so well, which is usually how you know that it's a pretty good episode. I had Nicole on from the Solidarity Apothecary project, and Nicole does so many things that I won't even bother summarizing them at this stage because she's going to do so in a bit anyway. But you should absolutely check out the website. If you're dealing with anything from grief to repression to you're struggling about something, I'm not saying that like it's a panacea that will fix everything, of course not, but it's a very, very helpful and rich resource that I genuinely highly recommend you check out. Other than that, as always, thank you for listening to Defy These Times. This podcast is part of the From the Periphery Media Collective. To support us, just head out to patreon.com/fromtheperiphery. I will do a separate recording going into it more in details, but I also wanted to say, at least at this stage, that I've been launching classes online. The first class is going to be on Lebanon, its history, its politics, roughly starting with from the 70s onwards with a focus on the so-called post-war, i.e. the 90s onwards, and I will even explain why I call it so-called post-war. The first class is going to start in January. There's already a lot of interest, which has baffled me because I posted this on Blue Sky and Mastodon a couple of times. I haven't even advertised it properly like here or on Instagram or whatever, and I've already had to create a second class, like a second session that same week. Going to start mid-January. You can still enlist if you want. All you need to do is to send me an email on ayub@defythesetimes.com. You're not committing to anything. You're just telling me that you're interested in this thing. I will respond to you there by email. There's also Signal if you want. It's ayub.02. In both cases, please introduce yourself and whatnot for security purposes, of course. And I will send you an email or a document explaining what the class is about. And if you're interested, there's everything's explained, so how to join and whatnot. It will be mid-January, the first session, as I said, going for 5 weeks. And there's going to be more after that, but I'm trying to get as many people as possible who are interested joining us in the first session because this is also a very good learning experience for me as well. As with this podcast, it's going to be pretty informal, structured, but absolutely like open to participation. People can share their reflections. There's going to be like homework, text, and audio clips or rather podcasts that are recommended but not required. You can still attend without doing anything other than just show up on that Saturday once a week for 5 weeks. And if you can't, I will always record a audio version of the class so I can send that to you separately as well. Okay, all that's left for me to do at this stage is once again to thank you all for listening. I hope you're doing relatively okay in this crazy world, and take care everyone.
Is it okay to swear, or shall I not?
Yeah. It's completely fine. It's even required.
Okay. Amazing. Thanks so much for inviting me to chat. It's a real honor. So yeah, I'm Nicole. I'm an anarchist and herbalist focused on supporting people experiencing state violence, and that's through a project called the Solidarity Apothecary. So yeah, it's a whole thing, like all the different things, but I offer kind of like one-to-one support for people, for example, who've been leaving prison or like prisoner family members. I also send like herbal care packages to people like all over the world who are experiencing like state repression of different kinds. I wrote a book called The Prisoner's Herbal, which goes to people in prison, like again, all over the world. And I'm also involved in a separate project called the Mobile Herbal Clinic Calais. Before I had my little one, I was working a lot in France with our clinic. It's like a team of herbalists, and we were supporting thousands of people, like refugees and people on the move there. So yeah, but the project's still going. I'm just doing sort of like behind the scenes, like medicine making and fundraising and stuff. And yeah, I kind of like fund all of that stuff through like online courses. I teach a course about herbalism and PTSD and traumatic stress, and yeah, sell the books online, like this herbalism and state violence book. And that kind of, yeah, enables me to do what I do. Like it's kind of a thing I run on my own, but I work with people like all over the world. And it's like a huge collective effort, if that makes sense. I guess just like as context, I started learning about herbalism when I was in prison, when I was 21. So I did a 3.5 sentence as part of a kind of like repressive operation against a campaign that was trying to close down an animal testing company. And yeah, like that kind of experience was like quite foundational in what I do now. And I'd already started supporting people in prison when I was like 16. My first boyfriend got sent down. So I've been supporting folks in prison for like, yeah, 20 years now. And just involved in like various different social struggles. And we can talk about the burnout stuff, but the very short version is I was in hospital in 2016 after like this really intense like anti-repression speaking tour, and I got really, really sick. And then I started writing about it, and it went really viral. And then Active Distribution, this like anarchist publisher, were like, "Yo, Nicole, can we put it in a book?" And I was like, "Go on then." And then that kind of fundraises to like support all the prisoner support stuff. So
Amazing.
Yeah.
There are like so many different ways we can go through this. I absolutely want to talk about I listened to it as a podcast. I know that there's a book as well, which I've downloaded, the Overcoming Burnout, the one that you just mentioned in the end. But before doing it, just in case people don't know what herbalism is, I don't want to assume. Can you explain it a bit?
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course. So yeah, like plant medicines have been like obviously the primary form of medicine for people on the planet, as well as, animals, since time began. And but obviously, like again, it's a whole other massive podcast of how, the kind of birth of capitalism and sort of more like patriarchal medicine has affected our relationship to plant medicines. But yeah, as a kind of herbalist, I'm working with plants. So I'm learning about their properties, like in depth, their different medicinal actions, how they affect the body, and, also studying, the human body and different disease states and things, and kind of trying to pair up people and plants. But it's, it's still the primary form of healthcare on the planet. And when I get people who, I may be new to herbalism or a bit skeptical, I'm like, "Oh, so you don't drink coffee?" And they're like, "What?" And I'm like, literally, if you're drinking a cup of coffee, you're having plant medicine every day. You're having that stimulation, that laxative effect, maybe it's giving you like energy and concentration. And yeah, that's basically what herbalism is. It's just like working with plants to kind of change and interact with the body. Yeah. Is that enough of a...
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I mean, you also you didn't introduce it a bit, but like if you put frontline and herbalism together, it may not, I don't know. For me personally, I was like, hey, I love as I already mentioned, I love the aesthetics of it. I love the title. This is just something I'm obsessed with in general. But it's one of those things that like, it makes you think of two different things at the same time, right? Like frontline, I don't know, it's like action, it's fast, maybe it's like whatever, like you're confronting something. Whereas herbalism feels more like, not quite passive, but like more, I don't know, more like something that one does in the background or whatnot. So, but putting those two together is for me, it was very interesting. It's one of the reasons I ended up listening to the podcast as well.
Oh, nice. Cool. Yeah, like I think the name is kind of like, yeah, like I see a frontline as like anywhere where we're like doing kind of any sort of like social struggle, social change kind of work. So like a local harm reduction project, working with people who are using drugs, who are, being fucking attacked by the police or something, like that is a frontline thing, as much as going and in a refugee camp somewhere or doing other like survival solidarity work. So yeah, and I think herbalism is an amazing tool because like ultimately these struggles, like they really, like all processes, right, like shape our body, shape our health, whether that's like trauma or class or, colonialism and capitalism. And like we need kind of all the kind of solidarity we can get from the plant world to help kind of survive these systems. And herbalism is also like a beautiful way of like putting that change in practice now, of like what does a real like ecologically like sustainable and like beautiful kind of reciprocal relationship with the land look like? And I feel like herbalism, not all herbalism, like we also get like capitalist herbalism and like all this horrible shit going on. But like, yeah, like I feel like plants are like amazing fucking teachers in how we kind of, rebuild the world, if that makes sense. God, that sounded cheesy. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm a newbie when it comes to herbs in general, at least drinking them. I mean, I do drink tea a bit, and besides coffee, I would say like I'm pretty. I still have a lot to learn. I grew up just drinking a lot of coffee, and now that my stomach doesn't tolerate coffee as well, I've been kind of moving more towards the black tea and green tea, and obviously tea in general, like herbal tea, more specifically these days as well. Um, and I admit I've been like fascinated by just how much you can experiment. I've been like experimenting, putting different things together and just seeing how that works and stuff. And it's almost like I took it for granted it's always there, but I definitely undervalued, I think, just how rich it can be and how obviously beneficial it can be, but also how radical it can be. Because I mean, you can absolutely take the perspective that you're doing this for yourself, which isn't bad in itself, like self-care and whatnot. That's not inherently a bad thing, but you're doing this to yourself. It's something that you just keep to yourself. But there's also, you can absolutely, and that's what you do very well, I think, the perspective that like you are learning about this. It's important that you also learn this as an individual, but you're doing so as part of this kind of more collective project. This intention for collective liberation, and not just like human liberation, but like the more than human world as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And like, I love that the best way to learn herbalism, it's like, it is just all about the body. And I think herbalism like really affects our relationship with our bodies, which is like a major contribution to burnout. But like, I feel like herbalism is just this like fucking awesome teacher of like, you start to notice things again. Like you mentioned your stomach, for example. Sometimes you spend years not even aware of your own stomach, and then you can start having teas and be like, oh, this feels like this. And this is making me go to the toilet more or less, and I just, that's what I mean as like plants as teachers. Like they just teach us so much.
Yeah, I was stuck in a loop for a while of because it's a habit at the end of the day. I barely thought about it. Like when I would have coffee in the morning, I would not feel well for quite some time. And it took me and my partner repeating this a bunch of times, and me then at some point actually realizing it, to her credit, that like maybe don't do that. Maybe do something else in the morning. And it's just one of those things. I'm a habits person, so it took me quite some time, even like unconsciously drinking the coffee and then realizing after a couple of sips that that's not what I actually intended to do this morning. Anyway, the long story short is that you do. Okay, so this is a good segue because I wanted to ask a bit later on about the class component of burnout, but you did mention like the relationship in capitalism in our bodies, and I wonder if you would be okay with like expanding on that a bit.
Oh, yeah.
A small question.
Yeah.
In 5 minutes or less. No, I'm joking.
Is there anything like more specific with that? Like,
I guess specifically the herbalism as a way of connecting with our bodies, and capitalism as a general rule contributes to the disconnect with our bodies. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah. Nice. Like fundamentally, to exist in a world where there is so much fucking like harm and oppression and violence against people and animals and landscapes, like we need to be like separate from that kind of like sensory input of what the fuck is happening, right? Like anyone will know, like if you scroll on the phone through fucking Instagram for more than like 3 minutes, then you're gonna like start dissociating, because there's like no way on earth you can feel that amount of suffering that is happening. And I think there is this like real intentionality with how our systems are designed. And, I'm obviously just talking as someone that grew up in England, but like, and Wales, like capitalism just like constantly demands this like repression of needs, right? Of like, you have to get up really early and like go to school. You have to like go to work and like sit your fucking body at a desk when really you want to be like moving around and connecting with the landscape and like connecting with other humans. And so there is just this like constant self-oppression of the body. And I actually wrote a piece called Herbalism as like a rebellion against self-neglect, and part of it is that like it was the herbs that kind of like taught me to start feeling my body, because I had been so separate from it because of, you know, like gnarly childhood stuff and, you know, like sexual abuse as a child and like all this fucking like horrible shit that meant that it's not safe to be in the body, and therefore you are able to just use it as a machine or as a workaholic to just like fucking, I used to write like organize into oblivion, just like keep organizing, keep going, like ignore your needs, ignore your need for rest, ignore your need for sleep. And I feel like herbs were like, you know, and I got into herbalism from, I guess, more of a like political thing of like, you know, like kind of more like green anarchist shit and stuff like this. Recognizing, you know, like some of the challenges with like capitalist pharmaceutical industry and blah, blah, blah. And then I feel like plants actually, because you have to have this like sensory relationship to them, began teaching me about my body of like, oh, this plant can help you like sleep well, or wow, that's like the deepest, nicest sleep I've ever had in my life, or wow, I've like slept through the entire night without a nightmare because, you know, I like rubbed a bunch of lavender oil on my neck before I went to bed, or like I just feel like plant medicines just like constantly teach you different things about your body, and then you start to notice, oh, I'm getting sick, like maybe I'll make a ginger decoction or start having more garlic in my food or whatever. And like, yeah, I feel like capitalism is like pushing us one way to like constantly reject our bodily needs and pretend that they don't exist. And herbalism is like pushing us the other way of like, hey, like feel your body, like observe the world, have a relationship with the land. And yeah, and hopefully that can help us like, you know, build that drive in us to be like, I want to fucking stop these like ecocidal destructive systems. Yeah. I don't know
Yeah.
if that was the question, but
No, it does. It does. Thanks. I mean, I'm still, so I did absolutely go through burnout for quite some time. And I think I've been dealing with that part of my life a bit like I think how one would deal with grief, in the sense that I'm not like over it, you know? I wouldn't describe myself today as still burnt out, but it's just one of those things that it's like the recovery process is not linear. So there's absolutely moments where I feel more intensely like I did at the time, but it's not as prolonged as it used to be. And one of the components of that, which is one of those things that I'm kind of working on now to I don't get better, is the disconnect with the body. Like I quite genuinely would say that for a number of years at the very least, I almost forgot that I'm physical, like I have a body. I'm like I knew that I need to like shower and like go to the loo and I don't know, stuff like that. But like self-care was pretty minimal because of depression and burnout. And it's only through that process, that recovery, I went through therapy, lots of friends, my partner, a bunch of people also helping me and stuff, actually learning how to cook helped a lot, stuff like that, that I started realizing how much of the issues, it's not like it started in the body, but it's almost like it lodged itself there, if that makes sense. It kind of became a way where like, I don't know, I atrophied, not necessarily like in a physical sense, I was still like walking a lot and stuff, but just like, I don't know, emotionally, but I would feel it in the body, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
One thing that I'm almost done with the Overcoming Burnout podcast, which is, as you said, also a book and initially like blog posts and stuff. Everything that we're talking about, I'll put them in the show notes and stuff. The Overcoming Burnout series, I've been, like, I listened to like, I don't know, 10 of them in one go, and then I immediately emailed you. Like, that's how much I connected with it. I recognize a lot of what you've been talking about. My own personal background is that I used to be involved in organizing and stuff, and a lot of the burnout that I ended up feeling, although I would describe it primarily as coming from like work and capitalism and just living in all of that, rather than the protest movements, which was actually energizing, if anything. But so there was some trauma, there was some repercussions, there was all of that, and I kind of felt that later on, you know, not in the moment. I have very much this almost mode of I don't know, it's adrenaline, it's whatever it might be, or like I'm just hyper focused in the moment for however long that requires me to be, and then once that is done, or I can't anymore and whatnot, there's like this very prolonged, almost slow and then not so slow crash or burnout or whatever. Now I'm better at like coping with it in some sense, but like it's never fully gone. And a big part of why it's not fully gone is that we still live in the worlds where that have caused these harms in the first place, and in many ways they have gotten worse since anyway. The episodes themselves, or like let's say the book and the podcast, there is a very, very convenient paragraph that I'm happy to read, unless you're willing to do so, kind of describing what it's about. Would you mind doing it, or do you want me to do it?
I don't mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I can read it. I'm very dyslexic, so reading out loud is like, but I wrote it, so I'll.
You can take your time, no worries.
Yeah, so this is like the blurb on the back of the book. Organizing with others for human, animal, and earth liberation can be one of the most empowering experiences alive. Yet, frontline resistance comes with risks to our physical and emotional health that can lead many people to burnout and abandon social movements altogether. This book is about overcoming burnout, linking the author's journey of recovery with wider systemic forces such as classism, sexism, and power dynamics in groups, poverty, chronic illness, and ableism, as well as grief and trauma from prison and state repression. It is a call for models of mutual aid and collective care, simultaneously deeply personal and acutely political for anyone involved in grassroots organizing. It is a must read.
I agree. So, okay, we of course already talked about like herbalism, frontline herbalism, and herbalism as mutual aid, effectively. Talk to us a bit, if you don't mind, about the book itself, the blogs, and then the podcast, of course, just the Overcoming Burnout series itself. You did mention how like it started off as this thing. You just felt like you needed to get out there, you just needed to write about it, but it went viral. What was the feedback like? Like, what were they connecting with?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, like I mentioned, like I ended up in hospital with really bad rib pain, which lasted for like several years. And, it kind of propelled me to like do clinical training and stuff like that. So I am like grateful for those experiences. But yeah, like every blog was just like the outcome of something that was going on in my life in that moment, like some theme that was coming up. And there was 23 of them in the end, and they just kind of, I mean, like I'm a real like like control freak planner type, but like it was all kind of like unplanned, like spontaneous, kind of like almost like rants, to be honest. I'd often just like wake up in the middle of the night with like and just like write and kind of get all this stuff out, and then it just went fucking viral. And like people from everywhere like were emailing me and just being like, oh my God, like I've seen this in my groups, or like the second blog in the series is called like When Did I Get So Mean? And I just like listed out just like mean fucking thoughts I'd have about other people. And it was very raw and very honest, and mean thoughts I'd have about myself, but like just kind of like, why aren't people taking things seriously? Like everyone treats like struggle as a game, like all of this kind of stuff. I think people just kind of they connected with it because they could just see it where they were. And I was always amazed by like how international that was, because I was really writing from just, like someone who'd been involved in like social movements and stuff mostly in the UK. So it always kind of amazed me when, someone like literally from fucking Palestine would like email me being like, wow, like, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, what? I just want to acknowledge that, like, I've changed a lot. Like I do a little introduction to the podcast series, which is like a free kind of private podcast where I'm recording the chapters. But, I have like grown and changed a lot since, when I started writing. But
that's what made them you do. There is that in the introduction that you make, as you said, but I like the fact that it is also, you were reading thoughts that were like in the past that are still obviously very, very relevant to today, but it's like that component of it being raw. You saw, like I have in front of me episode 7, Composting Grief. We have like the journal question, like what losses have you experienced as an organizer? How do you feel about them? Which of your losses are the most painful or incomplete? How do you talk about or work with grief in your collective? If you've experienced repression, how has it or does it feel? How do you honor fallen comrade? And those are like the you would read this blog post, these reflections, and then you ask these questions, kind of these open-ended questions, inviting the listener to also reflect on them, which I've certainly been doing, and I'm still doing. That must have been, I would presume, that must have been part of why it went viral, why there were so many people who were kind of, relating to it, as you said, even someone from Palestine or what have you, because it's both like, at times it's specific, of course. I mean, you're a specific person who went through specific experiences, but it is also, to the extent that some of this or a lot of this can be like more how do I say this? Like more generalized. Like more people have experienced certainly elements of this and like versions of this. It's presented in a way that I think is very approachable, which is not what you always find. We have as part of from the Periphery Media Collective, which is the media collective that this podcast is part of. We have this other podcast called the Mutual Aid Podcast. I'm absolutely gonna put you two in touch, by the way. And they also have these they're actually long episodes where they have conversations with people about, of course, the main topic being mutual aid. But the strength of that podcast, and I'm not just saying that because we're part of the same collective, is that it's informal while also being structured or semi-structured. So, like, let's say focused. So it's not rambly, and neither is your podcast, to be clear. And it's allowing the listener, well, as I said, in my case, it was in a podcast version, but the reader, I think, would be the same thing. It's inviting them to both be present and listen to like the very specific things being talked about, the very specific topic, the very specific questions that the guest and the host are trying to answer, for example. But also it's broad enough that if you don't know the specifics of what that, let's say, specific episode is about, you can still relate to those broader questions. And I think this kind of doing it both at once is a difficult balance, but I think you've done it quite well.
Thank you. I think there are just like common themes of like being a human. And I think because, I like didn't have like formal education. Like I left home when I was 16. Like I didn't go to university or anything. Like I think it did make a lot of the writing like more accessible. And I think, things like, like grief and division of labor groups and trauma, like they are very like human things. And I think in kind of social movements, like people are very like cerebral, like often very intellectual. Yes. And it's like quite, even if it's something related to someone's lived experience, it's very like da 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 da, like this like theory, blah 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 blah. And I think one of like the things maybe that I bring to the world is like I'm very like grounded, practical person, like hence the herbalism. And I think people really crave that because like we talked about already, like we're disconnected from the body and people are just like fucking shit at talking about feelings, right? Like when do you learn how to like talk about feelings? And like my mum, bless her, like, I was brought up by a single mum on benefits with really fucking severe like depression and suicidality. And like, I was literally like her counselor from like a 5-year-old. So like I grew up and, she eventually became like a mental health nurse. But I really grew up in a culture where like we would talk about feelings and I would listen to her feelings. And I think there's an element of my work, which is like, I'm kind of, trying to think like what could have supported her, to be a different mum. And I think, there was all sorts of like estrogen dominance and vitamin deficiencies and lack of social support and, fucking capitalism that was like affecting our lives and patriarchy. But like, that's why now in my clinic, I see single moms and I see people whose children are in prison and I see, people with really intense, like, severe depression who start working with a herb or different supplements or nutritional changes and actually feel like radically different. And I feel, like that, the kind of Overcoming Burnout book is a way of me like in a room of people where that everyone is just talking about something abstract. I'm just like, yo, like, let's think about our bodies. Like, how is everyone feeling? And which is, a super fucking STEM like thing to do. But I think especially in sort of like more like anarchisty type spaces, I think it is like a little bit rare. It's changing. But yeah, I think that's why a lot of people related to it, because it was like saying the unsaid, if that makes sense.
Yeah. If you don't mind, talk to us a bit about, you don't have to give specific examples, of course, for like privacy reasons, but in terms of the people that you just mentioned, like whether it's single moms, people who have kids in prison and stuff like that, and when they interact with like herbalism as a practice, have they kind of told you how has, how that has been changing their lives? How has that affected them?
Oh, for sure. Like, yeah, like we do like follow-ups and things, and
Hmm.
and also like even just people that are doing my online PTSD course will like regularly email me. And like, I think it's so hard because the world is so fucking shit that it is like completely understandable to be depressed and to have health issues because of like all these like larger factors like industrial agriculture and poverty and stuff like this. But like there is also, it's kind of like that constant like anarchist tension between like the collective and the individual. But like there is also like lots of things people can do for themselves and each other. And yeah, like I think for some people, like when you grow up like on benefits or whatever, like maybe you've not seen a fucking vegetable like for a really long time, and just like having like someone like even just taking a sip of elderberry syrup, like sometimes that like syrup has so many antioxidants and like iron and like diverse nutrients in it that that person's body, it's like they almost go into shock because they're just like, fuck me, like I've never had like nutrition like this. And like sometimes you just butt up against like the limits of herbalism. Like I can send someone like a box of medicines that will be really supportive for them, that are like suited to their body and their constitution and their health needs, and that's not always gonna fucking compete with the fact that their child is in solitary confinement, like being fucking tortured, or their ex is like fucking abusive and stalking them, and like they're under like constant chronic stress. So it's like, I think there's always this balance between being able to make a real difference to someone's life and, like recovering from burnout or chronic illness or depression, like is really life-changing. And sometimes it is little like 3%, 5% changes that can make a difference between someone killing themselves that day, for example. But yeah, there's always this balance with like, lots of people just need more like social support, just need more friends, like need people to help take care of them. Like they need a fucking break, like especially people who've experienced, like really intense poverty and homelessness and everything else. Like they actually just need like some fucking stability and security, and that will, enable their body to like start, repairing itself. But yeah, I do think herbalism can be really transformational. And like I always talk about, it's not like the medicines, like it is the like act of herbalism. It is like so healing for people to just build a relationship with like non-humans, and people who've been through a lot of trauma like don't always feel safe with other humans, whereas like going and like foraging or gardening or whatever, like that can be really fantastic for someone's nervous system, because they can just feel that sense of like safety and social connection without needing to like navigate, a human that might feel threatening, for example.
The part of the disconnect has been for me. I do this this like meditation. I'll also put this in the show notes. It's from a Buddhist center in, I think they're in France. But it's called something tea or coffee meditation or something along those lines. I don't remember what it is. But the point of it is short, like 7-8 minutes. And it's kind of inviting me in this case, to think of where did the herb come from, where did the coffee come from, what could have been the journey, all of that stuff. And it can sound pretty simple or small, I don't know, at least for those who haven't experienced it in the same way. But for me, the reason why it's been important, and I'm trying to be diligent enough to do it on a daily or quasi-daily basis, is because ultimately when one of the reasons why it was easy for me to have coffee instead of tea is I didn't think too much about what was in the coffee, because it was, this is just a coffee bean, it comes from this place. It was very simplistic in a sense, a very, very shallow relationship. Was with tea, it was like more intimidating to me. Like I wanted to know, and I also have this need to just know things. I wanted to know like where, if there's like 7 different herbs, this like breaks my brain, like 7 different places where this can come and stuff like that. And this allowed me to slow down a bit and to just think of, obviously, I'm not necessarily finding the answer in the sense that I'm literally Googling where everything's from. I do that sometimes. But the point is to just stop and pause and recognize that like this isn't just its existence as this final product, as this commodity, is not how it's not like it's just the final part of that journey. It's not like all of it. And in fact, the more I think of that path or that journey or that whatever cheesy word I'm using here, um, the more it gets complicated, because you cannot talk about tea without talking about labor. You cannot talk about tea without talking about, and by tea I mean like herbal tea as well, about labor, about gender, about class, about geography, where it comes from, and everything. Like it's absolutely part of this global system, and you can, and I'm sure some very smart people have told a version of a story of the world or the history of the world through tea or through coffee or through what have you. Um, where I was going with, I don't know where I was going with this. Just to say, I guess that like, um, it's been something that I'm still reflecting on, and I would absolutely love to have you on again one day when I'm like more into herbalism in a way that I can actually talk about it without being too vague. Um, but for our purposes, as like we're like slowly wrapping up, there's a couple of episodes. Let me open them a sec. It's not we don't have to like summarize them or anything. I like the title, and I think we can do something with that. If you remember the specifics, we can do that. Otherwise, we'll just talk about what we think it means, like composting grief. This is the second time in a not very long time I learned about composting as not just as this physical thing that we do, like to compost our foods and whatever, but as a practice. Shout out to R. They know who they are. Um, Composting even as temporality is how I've been learning from them, as something that is not just a thing, as I said, like part of turning your food into compost and so on, but as a healing thing. I mean, again, the composting grief. What can you tell us about that, if you don't mind?
I mean, before I was like, wow, the same time that I was heavily into herbalism, I was like really obsessed with like soil science, like to the point where I bought a scope and was like studying soil organisms, and I'd got them tattooed like all up my leg because I just obsessed with like soil microbiology. But like, yeah, like composting, like you said, isn't just about like a compost pile. It is just this like inherent cyclical process in nature where, we are getting nourishment from like death and dying, right? Like from a leaf falling from the tree that's getting eaten by all sorts of things. And then that's becoming, nutrients in the soil that is then giving life again. And yeah, like when I like was going through this like Overcoming Burnout book series stuff, like 2 of my best friends had died. And yeah, one of them, Jilly, like was kind of like a mum figure to me, like in the animal liberation movement. I met her when I was like 11 years old. And a lot of the kind of like this organizing into oblivion thing that I talked about was because I was like incapable of like feeling that grief. Because it was just like so overwhelming and life-changing and painful. And so there was this like avoidance of those feelings through intense like workaholism. And yeah, composting grief was like kind of, connecting to her like personal death, but also like what does grief look like in our movements, which for me at the time was I'd been heavily involved in this campaign and it had got like completely destroyed by the state, like 12 of us in prison, like we were all, I mean, I'm not going to go into all the repression things, but, I was like under surveillance for 2 years and like, yeah, had loads of conditions on me and like separated from people I love. And like, yeah, there was like a lot there and like huge losses and changes to the movement in terms of its like militancy and radicalness becoming more of a kind of liberal, pacifist, consumerist thing. And yeah, so it's just basically like processing all those feelings. And then ironically, once I like finished the series, I then had like 6 bereavements in a row over 6 months, like including my ex-partner who was killed. So it was like, yeah. And then it's weird recording this now because next week it's the inquest of one of my best friends, Taylor, who died in prison. So I almost cancelled because I was just like, I am like so fucking sad right now. But you know, I knew that this would be like a good interview. I think like the work you do is amazing. I had some like imposter syndrome because I was like, oh my God, everyone on the show is like super fucking clever. But anyway, back to grief. Like, it's just, yeah, I think this like composting metaphor is really beautiful because it's like, how do we take that like pain and process it? And, you know, like, and so many fucking moments in like history of different social struggles have really been born from, you know, like collective grief, like someone getting killed, you know, like George Floyd uprisings as an example with, you know, so yeah, it's a big fucking topic that loads of people have written about, but that was like, yeah, something I kind of wrote about too.
Yeah, thanks for that. This might be a bit risky on my part in the sense that it's not an easy topic to close an episode on, but I'll try and make it as brief as I can in this context. But I've been the reason I've been also thinking about composting grief and why that kind of resonates with me, among other things, is that I'm in a process right now where I can kind of describe it as pre-grieving, in the sense that my dog is old and he's getting sick, and we've been doing some tests and the prognosis isn't amazing. Let's put it that way. We don't know how long he has left with us, and it's just one of those things. Because he's a dog, he can't tell us, at least not as clearly, what's going on. So there are times where the past week has been a bit like that. Like a morning where like he seems completely fine, and then the afternoon where he seems like I need to go to the emergencies immediately. And it's just one of those things that like I know, because I've had dogs in the past as well, and I've lived with dogs all my life. I can see the signs. I can see that like the time is coming, so to speak. I don't know, of course, when and stuff, but like it's getting there. And so I've been thinking a lot of, well, him, and being here presently with him, and he's next to me now as we talk, and just, you know, making sure he's happy and comfortable and as much as possible, all of that stuff. But also like just thinking of the routines that I'm used to. As I said, I'm a habits person, and doing all of those things for the most part with him, because he's 14 years old. I've had him for 13 of those 14, and the difficulty with all of that, of course, is that it is going to be what it's going to be. And I know when the day comes, I'm going to be feel all of the obvious, I guess, clear emotions, and it's going to take me a long time to heal, if that's even the correct term, and so on. But even now, because we know, because there are clear signs that like things aren't going okay, other than he is almost 14 years old. I've been thinking about composting, weirdly enough, and composting grief, and this process that is not linear, that has multiple layers, but those layers are also interacting with one another, and it's not clear cut as to how, I don't know, if he passes away on a Monday, like what the Tuesday is gonna look like compared to, I don't know, the Monday after. See what I mean? Like it's been. What I'm trying to say, I guess, is that it's also been a helpful, personally, framework, because previously, whether it's friends, relatives, or indeed dogs that have passed away in my life, the way I would grieve, I would describe it as just shock, and then a long, prolonged process of trying to have some normalcy in my life, whatever that meant at the time. And now it's less about that. There's going to be that component of it anyway, but it's becoming more and more about just thinking through his life so far, not treating him as though he's not with us, because he is, but also not pretending like he's 1 year old, right? Because he's not. And just having those different, if that makes sense, those different temporalities at the same time, almost like in conversation with one another. Like I still remember him when he was 2. I remember him when he was like 5, and of course now he's almost 14, as I said. And now like that's the same being, right? But it's also not, because that's like multiple lives in it. I'm mixing my metaphors, but like it's a very, very useful framework. I'll definitely do more with that when I have a bit of more like mental space to think about composting, the temporality behind it as a practice, as something to really think through, both individually and collectively. But yeah, I guess this was like my long way of saying that like I appreciate the framing and I'm grateful for it.
No, I'm so sorry to hear that. What's his name?
Flip. His name's Flip. And he
Yeah.
just looked at me because of course I was loud.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that is what's really difficult about grief is like just the lack of timeline. And you think that you've kind of like processed and then you're just like smashed with something else again.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm really sorry to hear.
And I mean, thank you. It is. I say these things always. It's my quote unquote intellectual way of posting things, and I say like, it is what it is, which means nothing, but it is it is what it is. And we'll see. I mean, it's gonna take some time, and he's okay. Like, he's not in pain or anything. Thankfully, there are meds and stuff, so we're grateful for that. I guess as I said, as a way of wrapping up, would you mind talking about some? You did mention them at the beginning, so if you don't want to, you don't have to repeat everything, but like the projects that you're doing, what are certain things that people can go, or everything that you mentioned? As I said, I'll put those as links in the show notes. How can people support your work, support the Solidarity Apothecary, the ebooks, the podcast, everything you do? Because the website, and people can just literally go on the website because it's really rich, has a lot. But Leia, what can you tell us about it? Or tell us more, I guess, about it.
Sure. So yeah, the website is the best place to go, solidarityapothecary.org. And the podcast we've been talking about is like available for free on there. So you can just like kind of go through the store and access it, and it will send you a link automatically. So that's the Overcoming Burnout podcast. And then it's available as an ebook just for like £3. And then all my other books are also there. I don't post physical books out anymore since having a baby. So, but I've got a bunch of links of where you can buy like physical copies. And then my Frontline Herbalism podcast is available everywhere. And I'm also active mostly on Instagram. I know we all fucking hate social media, but it's there. And I do share a lot of pretty pictures of plants as well as lots of call outs for different things. Please feel free. Like, I'm not doing like many one-to-one clinics at the moment because I'm a single mum to a toddler. So it's like very challenging, but I am doing these kind of group programs. Like I had one the last 3 months called Hawthorn, which was like for 10 people, actually 9 of us in the end, different people experiencing repression. And we had like group calls every 2 weeks. Everyone got like one-to-one herbal support. And, just talking about the impacts of repression on people's lives and their bodies. And it's been really beautiful. And I love the kind of transition from just that kind of like solo work to like a group thing, like a collective healing thing. So that's been really nice. And I hope to do more of those next year. And you can donate on my website. And the Herbalism, PTSD and Traumatic Stress course comes out twice a year. And it's like completely online. So you can do it at your own pace. And every fucking thing I do is like no one turned away for lack of funds. So like 75% of people who join that course join for like, often quite a small donation. And I'm very grateful for people who can, financially contribute because that enables all of this stuff. But if you're interested in learning about herbalism, it's like a fantastic introduction to, herbal energetics and like harvesting and like ecology and stuff, as well as like how trauma shapes the body and understanding the nervous system, and like kind of the geeky deep dive into nervous system physiology. And then we talk in depth about different kinds of plants and their like affinity with the nervous system. So please check that out. And if anyone is experiencing repression or supporting a loved one in prison, or involved in a grassroots group who are experiencing burnout and challenges with that, you can request a herbal care package for free. It contains really lovely blends like support for the nervous system, immune tonic, some lavender oil, which is made with olive oil from the West Bank. Please like request stuff. Like I fundraise and purposely make this medicine so that people can like benefit from it, if that makes sense. And if anyone is supporting someone in prison and they want a free copy of the Prisoner's Herbal or the medicinal herb colouring book, like I've got online forms, you just fill it in, and like one of the like amazing happy helpers in the US or the UK or mainland Europe somewhere will get a book in the post to them for free. So yeah, that's my kind of like ecology of offerings. And everything is quite pretty with roses and stuff. There's always like a joke in Bristol that like one day there'll be like a bunch of repression against me, and it will just because they've connected everything with a fucking rose on it for every anarchist event, put it all together. I'm like, this looks like Nicole's like graphic design. So yeah.
I did say this, I think, a couple of times already, but it is like aesthetically also very pleasing to look at. And I think some people won't find that necessarily as important, but I do find this really important for the same reason that I think being touchy-feely is very important. It should also be welcoming. It should also be something that like is not just like, text and what it's a good thing. And I do appreciate I can see that a lot of effort has gone into it and still is going to it. So absolutely, like, listeners, check out everything we just said. And as I said, everything is going to be in the show notes. And yeah, I guess all that's left to me is to thank you, Nicole, for doing this. This was amazing.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a real honor to be on your podcast. And take care.
Thanks so much for listening to the Frontline Herbalism podcast. You can find the transcript, the links, all the resources from the show at solidarity-apothecary.org/podcast.